second time around, so we doing it in style. It's all elite, not accepting defeat. A lot can change in 1 year, but more can change in 1 week. Believe the hype, the train's leaving tonight. Hit the throttle, we heading straight to Chicago. It's only getting better, this is our future endeavor. I can't wait to see the fight between Pac, Kenny, Omega. It's bound to be killer, the winner have to consider. It will all be over quicker, deliver the V-trigger. It's picking up, Lucha Bros versus Young Bucks. Many have tried, none have outdone us. Name a top 10 team, none are above us. We've been working hard towards our goals, you can't stun us. Sean Spears is crazy, what a deranged guy. Attacking Cody with a chair, hasn't explained why. It's a shame Cody's not to blame. He's on top of his game, bringing honor to his father's name.
For the thousands in attendance and the millions listening at home, let's get ready to podcast. Welcome back, All Elite family, to another exciting episode of Wednesday night's main event, our AEW's Dynamite recap review show, where we also cover what happened on AEW's Dark. But before we jump into both of those shows, AJ, how are you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. Not much has changed since, Monday, but
Back
everything's
in video
been...
form. A lot
We're
has
back.
changed.
That's right. We're in Technicolor. We're here. We're
we
from the
did repair
future.
those technical issues. Who knows what other technical issues we could run into tonight?
None. This is the show with zero issues.
Our boy is setting the bar pretty high for us, but we could hope for the best. Let's jump right into AEW Dark, which happened last night. I really thought that it was a pretty good show overall. I think that the bottom half of the card wasn't as... I think that it worked. It wasn't as stacked, but it worked out, especially with the main event with Kenny Omega and Joey Janela. What a match. We don't really need to talk about the whole show. I think overall I do want to mention that Kip Sabian looked fantastic in that first match.
Did.
He appeared to injure himself, but still came back and won, and in that managed to look really good, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought that Sonny Kiss did a couple of really good things to make himself look well. I think all three of them did well.
They all looked pretty good.
Yeah, in what they needed to do. And that's basically the point of Dark, so that was sweet. We also had SCU and SEMA versus the Dark Order and the Hybrid 2. The cool. Hybrid 2 got to pick up another victory, so I was excited about that. But everything, the one match that everyone was talking about, Joey Janela versus Kenny Omega, it absolutely delivered. On every way that you could have expected. I think it maybe wasn't as violent as I was expecting, especially with the way that the last Lights Out match went. But other than that, I was really impressed just with what Omega and Joey Janela brought to the table for a Dark show.
I wasn't sure if it wasn't too violent for me because I wasn't sure what I was expecting going into it. I didn't know if it was just going to be like a regular hardcore match, if it was going to be like the last one, because like you said, it's on a Dark match, and my God, it was so good and it was so crazy. And can we just say that One Winged Angel was the sickest thing that I have seen in a very long time?
Yeah, man, what a fantastic way to finish off the match. And then the way that they set up the match early on in the show I thought was really interesting as well, too. Just opening up the show with Omega talking to the Young Bucks and explaining that he was going to have a match on Dark, and they were like, oh, yeah, do like a filler match. And then he's like, no, I'm going to face Janela in an unsanctioned match. And they did a good job at putting Janela over as like a superstar or like something really crazy. And I really appreciated that because initially I was worried when they were talking about like, an enhancement match. I didn't think they were going to do that to Joey, but just the way that they were briefly mentioning it, I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah, 100%. I was really happy that it made Janela look like, oh man, you can't go fight Joey Janela. Because I think before he even said an unsanctioned match, he just said Joey Janela, and they were already like, oh man.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I've wanted to see a lot, and I think they're doing a better job at that now that we have weekly television and stuff like that. Is just promoting different superstars and helping us and helping the casual fans even see like, oh shit, this is someone who should be taken seriously. Because even though Dark is like a dark show, last week's episode did 800,000 viewers on YouTube, which is I think a really good number considering it's an hour-long show.
No, it's a super good number. You're almost hitting 1 million views, which is basically what your TV is, and so it's really, really good. I can't really think of anything better to say than it's 800,000, and then the other one got 500,000 in a matter of 12 hours.
Yeah. So I would almost not even be surprised to see this one do at least a little bit more, if not considerably more,
so, yeah.
just because of the internet hype that the main event on this one has gotten. And then, like, looking forward to next week, we have Taz doing commentary for that one, as we talked about on our last episode. So it's just like they're rolling really well. I haven't gotten to see any matches necessarily announced for Dark, but I really have to just anticipate a good card overall based on what they've put together for the first 2 weeks.
I agree.
And then just jumping right into this week's episode of Dynamite, I think overall it was a pretty good show, and I think it was way better on paper. That's not to say that the show itself didn't deliver. I just think that there felt like something a little bit missing maybe in this one.
Yep, I agree with that. I didn't love it that much. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it was very like, the bar was set really high for this.
Yeah, the first 2 weeks were so good. Then we had these really spectacular, like what a lineup from top to bottom. Let's just start with the first match. We had SCU versus the Best Friends, but going into this match, the Lucha Brothers attack SCU. Christopher Daniels gets hit with a package pile driver on the ramp, so he's paralyzed. He cannot wrestle. And so, of course, Scorpio Sky is right there to fill in. I thought it was a little bit weird the way that they placed this. I understood what they were trying to do, but it didn't feel supernatural.
It wasn't supernatural. I was during the attack. I actually was freaking out because I was like, "Oh my god!" Whenever he hit the package pile driver on the ramp, but I do agree that this felt very off to me. That it was odd to just have them come out and get beat down. It felt like not in the spirit of what we've been watching.
Well, and because again, these guys are on opposite sides of the bracket, and unless the only explained reason would be that they're the only real challenge they see on that side of the bracket, which I guess would make sense, being that Jungle Boy and Marco Stunt aren't necessarily like a long-lasting team, and Private Party also hasn't had a lot of longevity on a mainstream level, at least. So based just upon those two things, I could understand it, but it's still a little wacky that Pentagon and Phoenix are just randomly attacking SCU and trying to take them out of this tournament.
Yeah, it seems like a little extreme for one. What do they have? One confrontation on TV, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, and exactly, one on TV and then one way back on Being the Elite. So if you've been following, it feels pretty cool because it's been a long-lasting thing. But at the same time, it's kind of like, you know?
It's very weird to like.
It just doesn't make it doesn't make a ton of sense. If they were on the same side of the bracket, it would be better. But I feel like we're being force fed the idea that this is going to be our team. Like this is our final. This is the finals right here, which is fine. Yeah. That's not bad.
It is fine, but it's just like you're telling me.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm not mad about it, but there was that. And then obviously SCU beats the Best Friends. They win off of a powerbomb backstabber combo, which absolutely did not hit at all. Scorpio Sky just didn't have it timed up. You could tell it was rough, man. And they went straight to the finish, so it wasn't as bad as some moments where you see guys not really knowing what to do when they try and redo it, or they try and like get something else in and make a different finish. They just sort of rolled with it, which was fine. And Excalibur did a decent job at trying to sell it, but it was just so rough that it was tough.
He did his best, and so did Scorpio Sky. However, that was very not good. I didn't hate the match entirely. I thought most of the match was pretty good, but that finish really, that was bad.
Yeah, that finish it set the tone for the rest of the, like, not in a sense that like the rest of the show was that bad, but it just sort of really set the tone for the whole show and also set the tone for that match. It kind of made you forget anything cool that had happened before that, and you were like, damn. Yep. And I felt bad for Scorpio, but at the same time I was like, come on, like because you could tell he was upset, and I'm like, you're on TV. Mad, yeah. This isn't Ring of Honor anymore. You can't be on TV like, oh man. Like, yeah. Like, and I get it. I totally get being frustrated with yourself and what happened, but you can't, like, it's just, to me, on really national TV, on TNT, you could, like, see it, and I was like,
Yeah.
But still a decent match. From there, we get Santana and Ortiz defeating a couple of local guys, John Silver and Alex Reynolds. This was a quick 2-minute match. The first unannounced match that we've gotten on any AEW show, I'm pretty sure, But it
I
was
think
fine,
so.
and I'm okay with that. If we're just gonna get once in a while a feeder match for a couple of guys to really
Yeah.
remind the crowd who they are, and we haven't seen Santana and Ortiz really do much in AEW. So for them to get an official match and a quick win is really necessary.
It was good to, yeah, exactly, do that. Make the record look good. Make it seem, because like obviously they're going to be wrestling the Young Bucks, but you have to make them do stuff in between time. And so this was a really good way of doing that. Also, the opponents were pretty good. I mean, they were only there for 2 minutes, but that was cool. I was just cool to see that AEW too can bring in, random guys and they can fill a
Yeah.
roster even if you don't know who
It
it is.
makes sense. And the one thing that I like you said about filling their record almost is it makes a way more sense to have these guys who now have a tag team win under their belt. They're 2-0 in AEW, so it's not like a 1-0. Oh, we're challenging the Young Bucks. Now they actually have a couple of victories under a couple of different like match types. So. And just speaking of that, Jericho's on the big screen. He praises the Santana and Ortiz. He talks about them and talks about how great they are. He then says that they want to face the Young Bucks at the Full Gear pay-per-view. This is obviously a match that's going to happen, something you could sort of see the writing on the wall for in previous weeks, but it's a really great match that I think no one will be disappointed with.
Yeah, we expected this as soon as the Young Bucks lost that private party match. There was really nowhere else for them to end up than Santana and Ortiz. And I'm excited for this match. I think this is going to be absolutely great. And I really hope
it's going to be insane, and it's going
to be crazy.
It's going to expose Santana and Ortiz to the whole world, like show the whole world how great these two really are, because I saw them in Chicago at the Jim Lyman Memorial Tournament facing up against the Lucha Brothers. They had an insane match, probably one of the best matches I saw the whole weekend, and now to see them go up against the Young Bucks, I'm like, it's going to be more of the same. So I'm
taking your word on this, because I really haven't seen much of them. So this is the kind of match for me.
Oh, yeah, this is really exciting, like something for new fans of just like, I don't know exactly what they're going to call them. I don't think it's going to be LAX, but I think that's the one thing that they should figure out, especially like because it's okay with them being in the inner circle, but are they just going to always be the inner circle, even if it's just the two of them? I don't think that would be a good idea.
No, I feel like they're going to figure something out, but I don't know what it's going to be. Or maybe they're just going to be Santana and Ortiz, I guess.
Yeah, so, but from there we get a hype video hyping up Cody Rhodes versus Chris Jericho at the pay-per-view. Yeah, what an awesome job. They did a really, like, it was different. It felt really different for mainstream professional wrestling. It might be, like, something that was sort of done in other independent companies or something like that, but it was still seems so different for AEW or for any, like, mainstream level of wrestling or even MMA.
Yeah. Anything like that, because it's on such a large scale. Like you said, we've seen this in the indies, but we've never seen this here, and it was so good and so well done. I was ready to not like it too, because when it first started, I was like, oh, this is weird. Is this like a movie? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
but the minute it turned documentary, it was great.
Yeah, I was like, oh, are we doing a Road 2 thing here? What exactly is this? And what I mean by, like, because we've talked for many weeks about, or at least I've talked for many, many weeks about, oh, I hope they present their matchups like MMA or UFC, where we have these hype videos and these constant interviews and stuff like that. And this felt a little different than that in the sense that they had it also be cinematic. You know, it was like you said at the beginning, you couldn't tell if it was going to be a movie or a documentary or where exactly they were going with it because it felt so, like, top-notch and so well done. So I was really excited about that, and it was a really good, like, preview for anyone who isn't really, maybe, who might not be too excited about that match, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, cinematic, that's the word. And I was getting Lucha Underground vibes, to be honest, except it was more grounded in reality, obviously.
Yeah.
But because of how well it was done and how well they presented it. And it's really, like you said, kind of like Road 2 spilling over into their television, and I love that.
Yep. And then from there we get the women's championship match. This was one thing that sort of left me a little bit conflicted because I wasn't too sure how I felt about the women's championship being defended so early in the show. I understand they had a lot of tag team matches and stuff like that lined up, but I still didn't know how I felt about it, you know?
Yeah, especially on the card where the title match is already there. But the match itself is what I mean, it's just...
It didn't live up to that hype either.
No.
And also, it also kept the tone of like, This like the show just started off on a really weak footing, and then this match, like, again, it wasn't a bad match. Rio does a really great job,
No, not bad.
and there were really great moments within it, but there were also some really tough moments that you were like, oh man, this isn't what you want to see on a professional level on national television. It's not to say that it was the worst wrestling in the world or the worst match in the world, but when there's 1 million people watching, if not more, and really the women's matches are what are bringing in new viewers and attracting that younger audience. So you have to hope for this match to have been a little bit better. Rio ends up retaining. That was the one bright spot for me, is that because she is the bright spot in this. I think that Britt Baker is someone that we had seen as the ace early on, but she does, like you said, she needs work. She's someone that could use like almost a developmental time to get better instead of being put immediately into that position as a top person. And that's where I'm glad that they at least had the foresight to put the championship on Rio instead of maybe going right away with Britt Baker as we had assumed.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the title picture looks like going into Full Gear after this. I'm hoping that we're going to see something like a B. Priestley Rio, but I'm imagining it's going to be a triple threat. I don't know what it's going to be, though. I don't know what they're doing there.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe there will be a little bit more of an idea of the direction based upon the matches that they have for Dark. Maybe if Nyla Rose, because Nyla Rose attacking Rio post-match. I haven't really felt any follow-up to that, and not necessarily that there should be, because Nyla has taken a lot of losses leading up to that, but still, she's someone that I would expect to be involved.
Yeah, something. I mean, I don't want to just drop off the earth after all this build-up, too. That's the other thing.
Yeah, and the thing about it is what's also a little bit difficult, I would almost rather see Britt almost turn heel so she could work a whole program with Rio, because I think a program with Rio would be super beneficial for Britt. I think better, especially having to work that face versus face style match, I think it just really made, like, it messed a lot up for Britt. And I feel like it's not even Britt's lack of talent, it's just more of her maybe even being in her own head when she's out there. You can almost feel it when you're watching.
Yeah. I totally get what you mean by that, and I kind of feel that too. It's just there's been a string of a disappointing feeling this show, and it didn't stop here. It's just, it feels like, oh man, this is going to be so great, and it's not as great as I thought it was. Not bad, just a little disappointing.
Yeah, I think, again, in our heads especially, that we've almost maybe hyped up Britt Baker too much to be something maybe more than she is, as far as, like, being a well-rounded wrestler entirely. Again, I think we've had this idea that she was going to be the ace, so she would be able to come in and really run at that top level of matches, and I think with the right opponent she can, but I also think that there's a lot that she has to work on.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think we're totally in the wrong for that, because I feel like she was kind of presented to be kind of the ace a little bit.
Oh, for sure. I think that was the presentation of her. But again, like I said, I commend them on it in the sense that her and Adam Page were two people really put in a position early on you thought were going to be main players, and they're building to that. They're not just forcing it down your throat, which is good, because like we said, Britt needs the work. So if they had forced it down our throat, the backlash would be way more immense than I think anything could be right now.
Absolutely.
And the match finishes up. Rio hits the double knees. She goes for two. She goes for it a second time. Doesn't hit it. Britt Baker follows with an elbow strike. Locks in the lockjaw. Rio counters that into a cradle and retains the championship. It was sweet to see. I really thought that Rio might be dropping the championship here, just based upon Britt Baker had the move locked in. She at least didn't have it locked in entirely, but I think that it was all right. And again, at least I'm glad Rio retained. So that's my main point in that.
I liked the finish a lot. That was definitely stand out to me as well. And I think she had it locked in, but she just kind of powered through the pain and pinned her, which I liked. When I thought that was really cool and a cool way to end it, that roll up. And I feel like her getting those quick wins like that is really cool because of her size, and that whole advantage plays in with almost every opponent she has. And so I hope that trend keeps up.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the perfect story to tell. And Rio's like a perfect person for the fans to just get behind and root, like that Rey Mysterio type of feel, but almost for the women's division. So that was pretty sweet. From there, we go back to the tag team tournament. We get the Jungle Express, but instead of Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, we get Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy taking on the Lucha Brothers. This is because Luchasaurus was injured. If you were following on Twitter, you knew beforehand. Otherwise, commentary did a pretty good job at explaining what had happened. The one thing that I took note of from the commentary is that it seemed like the way that Excalibur explained it, it almost seemed a lot more serious to me. I really hope it isn't, because the way he explained it was a non-contact hamstring injury. And if you follow any type of major professional sports, especially the NFL, when we're talking about a non-contact injury, something that happens just by like chance, that's something like a muscle tear or something that happens where it keeps someone out for months on end. If Luchasaurus is out for any extended amount of time, but like I'm talking about a month to 3 months to 6 months, it's going to be really like detrimental to that team that had an opportunity to be freaking awesome. Now, when he returns, I think if the fans remember, then it'll be a super good pop. But I don't think it's worth like obviously what happens. You can't control this type of thing, but it's really detrimental for Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, because like at the very least it explains the loss a lot more. Marco being able to consistently be the one to take the pins is fine, but eventually something's got to give. We've said this multiple times, and now with him being injured, the two, Jungle Boy and Marco, can be popular, but you cannot take them nearly as serious as when they had Luchasaurus. And that's the biggest point. Like when they're riding a string of losses and they lose their strongest guy, they're at the bottom. They're now at the bottom, like in terms of like ranking a team, they're at the bottom. So I really hope that Luchasaurus' injury isn't something that's long-lasting. Pentagon and Phoenix looked fantastic just from their entrance all the way to their, like, everything in the ring, everything about them. Like, these two guys are guys who you can feel total like pros. Stars. Total pros in the sense of, like, these aren't necessarily, they didn't work years in WWE, but when they're on TV, there's a difference. You know what I mean?
Yep. I know exactly what you mean. They're on a whole other level. It almost feels like they're veteran, even though they're still young. It's just like they know exactly what they're doing and they know their mark. And like you said about the Jurassic Express, I don't know how this team would work long term. Honestly, I think the best thing for Jungle Boy, if that happens, is to get him out of the team. No offense to Marco Stunt.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Marco did a bad job tonight, because hats off to Marco.
No,
Marco looked like $1,000,000. He filled in super great. But when we're talking about having like a giant next to these guys who can then legitimize them to them now being like the two smallest team, like it's tough. And like you say, to maybe take them apart, but even then, if you take them apart, I think it hurts each of them equally, because at least Marco or Jungle Boy can play off of consistently being there to save Marco that type of thing. But it's just difficult because, like I said, both guys are pretty small. So, but all three work together so well. Marco and Jungle Boy as a team are solid. They're a solid unit. They do things so well together. It's just a matter of, like, you can only suspend your disbelief so far, and Marco looks great at what he does, but he also looks great at bumping and taking all because he's so small, because that seems much more realistic. So it's hard to take it too seriously. I love Marco too, dude, and that's the tough part.
Marco Stunt's great.
Because when you see him like actually paired up against like a big guy or a bigger guy, not because Pentagon and Phoenix aren't even the biggest guys in professional wrestling, not by any means. So, and in terms of that, I think that like they did a great job. I'm really excited for Marco to have gotten this opportunity and to have done such a great job with it. But I hope it's not a long-term injury for the whole unit's sake, because all three are better with them being together. So just based on how commentary put it, I was a little nervous, but we'll probably get more on that in the coming days or weeks.
I think you're dead on with that, yeah.
And next up, we get Paige and Omega going up against Mox and Pac, a match that Jim Ross initially called the main event, which I thought was freaking hilarious. Going into the commercial, he's like, "This will be our epic main event," and then coming back, he's like, "This is 4 main event caliber wrestlers," and I was like, "Yeah, cover it up, brother." A pretty like probably one of the better matches, if not the best match of the night, depending on who you ask.
It was great.
All 4 did a great job. Again, when we're talking about pros and guys who are doing a great job, this was it. I don't think anyone really had a moment where I was like, "Oh man, you missed your spot," or like there might have been a couple of like missed spots or botches, but there was nothing where it felt like, oh, these guys aren't doing this professionally, you know?
Yes, yes. The match was, I thought it was spectacular, and I did have to break away for a moment, but maybe I missed it, but I didn't really notice any botches or anything. So I don't know. I just thought it was a great match top to bottom. I didn't have any issue with it. I thought the finish was super, super awesome, and I was marking out really hard.
Yeah, especially you get to these two bringing in the weapons. Shout out to our guy
Yes.
Rice Remsburg in the middle of all of it, running away from the havoc that's going on
That
in the
was
ring.
great.
And they're doing a good job at explaining it on commentary. They're like, this guy doesn't want to die. What do you think he's gonna do?
Yeah.
Disqualify anybody? Like, whatever. And then from there, Pac comes in, rips the weapons out of each guy's hands, and like that was pretty sweet
Love that.
too, because Pac is like, I just want to win. He's like, I don't give a damn
Yeah.
about your weapons,
And
and
he's
I'm
like,
not
"You're not
trying to
using
get
your head."
disqualified. Like, let's win. And that's cool because that's the story of Pac. Like, he's supposed to
Yeah.
be riding wins and like being just that's all he gives a shit about is wins. So that's cool. And like I thought that was really interesting. And then
Oh, yeah.
what we ended up having Moxley turn his back on Pac, drops
Yeah,
Pac.
and then he bounced.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get the
Thought that was
finish.
great.
We get the
Uh, the-
finish. Oh, dude, the finish was such a sweet sequence too. Omega and Paige had such a great like chemistry.
Yeah.
This is the second week in a row where I've seen someone who I didn't expect to have fantastic chemistry with Adam Page just seem like they would be naturally perfect, like awesome
Adam
tag team
Page
partners.
is great, is what I've learned. Adam Page is just really good.
He's good, but I think he should be like a tag team guy, man. I don't like. I could be really
think?
wrong, but I think if he had like the perfect partner, he could be a wicked awesome like tag team guy. Because every match that I'm really like excited by him and like having these like great moments with him is when he's like in a tag team match, you know, and he's able to
Yeah.
feed in and come back in and get his hot spots and like that type of shit. I don't
Looks like
necessarily
somebody needs a heel turn.
right.
Somebody needs to go to the inner circle quick.
Yeah, pair him up with Sammy G or something like something
Yeah.
crazy. But like honestly, but what I also appreciate is these tag team. Again, we've talked about this before. They're treating these random pairings as like legit tag teams. Like we have Omega and Page, who aren't really a legit tag team out there, doing tag team moves, like working together as a unit, not just tagging in and out and doing like what you're used to in a tag team match that features guys who aren't normally tag team partners.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It felt like a match that you would actually want to see, not, oh, you're watching this match because it promotes the angle. I actually wanted to see all these guys wrestle. They wrestled
Yeah.
with each other, like you said, like tag teams, not just four guys in a match.
And it was such an exciting match. Like I said, one of the best matches of the night. And another thing I want to commend them on is that they go the extra mile to sort of keep track of even random pairings and their rankings. And they even put up the rankings for the two job guys as they made their entrance during the commercial, which like to many people that's not important. It doesn't really matter. But say we use these job guys again, or say Paige and Omega are a team again. Like we have these records just in case, and you have to imagine that they're going to keep them stored away somewhere in some, because it's not hard. Everybody has access to Excel or whatever, so they can easily keep these type of records stored away and utilize them in the future if necessary. So I just appreciate them going the extra mile at keeping track of, like I said, even the job guys.
That.
So
That's
I
what
thought that was
say.
great.
That's phenomenal. I had no idea they did that. And like you said, if they come back, and they very well could, then if for whatever reason they ever won, it would be insane.
Yeah,
You would actually have a record.
Yep. So Hangman Page ends up picking up the 1-2-3 on Pac, which is perfect because it sets the stage for that match, the rematch at the pay-per-view. They haven't really had a clean finish to that match, so when that match does become a thing, and you can see it, you could see the foundation for the pay-per-view, essentially the whole card. You can almost predict it outside of the women's championship match, I feel like, at this point. And I feel like even then they might just do like a triple threat women's match with Riho and Brie or Riho, Britt, and Bea Priestley, like something like that, which would be good in and of itself. So I think they're doing a really great job at building to that, and that was just another good match at doing a good job at building. And the one thing I liked as well is Omega and Mox. This is the first time they're touching leading up to their match, and they did a really good job at these two. Like they did a lot, but they didn't do a lot. You know, if that makes any sense. Like because at first I was like, I don't know if I want these guys to touch before, but it did.
Mhm.
It actually did a lot because it made me want to
Gave you a
see
little
a lot
taste.
more.
Yeah.
And they weren't just in there for 30 seconds. Like they did
No.
like probably 2 minutes of like going in there and then winning again 2 more minutes. So it was like they're really beating each other down and showing
Mhm.
showing what they're gonna do on the pay-per-view, which was
And
good,
I
but it
love
was
how
only
much
a
they just
taste.
yeah, and I loved how much they were ripping into each other because it was like, man, they really hate each other, and I love it, and it makes you want to see more. Like you said, it was just perfect, and I don't know, this match was great. This match, if it was on a better show, I don't know if I would have loved it as much, but
But it
it's
stood out
on.
as like
It
as a
stood
great
out as
match
this.
or one of the better
Yep.
matches. And the thing that I also have to take note of, which is funny, we're talking about this as being the best match on the show or one of the better matches, is no one hit a finisher. Like
Yeah.
they all like Kenny and Paige
Well, you had
went
the
off of
Deadeye.
signatures. Well, I guess it depends on what you think about like Paige's finishers, because I
I
look
don't
at
know
his
what it is.
finisher as
Yeah.
the flipping clothesline into the ring, but it
Oh,
could
I
be the
don't. I
Deadeye.
thought that was like yeah, I thought that was a
So
signature.
okay, maybe that's it. But either way, like they're not necessarily like prioritizing one finisher, and that's the great thing too is they
Mhm.
have so many different moves that we don't necessarily know what his finisher is. He can win off of like 3 different ones,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah,
good
you're
too.
right.
And I think that's just my point is like Omega didn't have to hit the one-winged angel on Moxley to set that up, or Moxley didn't have to hit the paradigm shift, even though it would have been easy enough
Mhm.
to hit. Like they kept a lot of that tucked away until the very end, so that was good.
Yeah, I love that a lot actually, and it makes it more special whenever wrestlers are going all out and finishers are flying off everywhere. You don't want to just do that all the time because every WWE match it's like that. Every tag match like this, it's everybody hits their finishers at the end, then the final finisher.
Yeah, and for this being the third tag team match on the card, like just thinking back, or really the fourth tag team match on the card, if you consider that squash match, like each
Mhm.
match did their own little job at standing out in its own little way and
Yeah,
doing it was a good like. There's not a lot of shows where you can say more than half of the matches were tag team matches, and this made them better or worse, you know?
yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So I don't know. I thought this was, like I said, it was a great like random pairing match, and they didn't have to do too much extra with it.
Fantastic.
And then from there, they build into the next week's show by just running down essentially the card, talking about Lucha Brothers are going to be facing Private Party, SCU taking on the Dark Order. So we're getting the semifinals. Also discussing that Britt Baker and the Young Bucks are going to be in action, and we get Pac facing John Moxley, which is cool. Like they immediately announced that after Moxley left Pac, which is cool because I feel
Mhm.
like as a fan you're watching it and it makes sense. Like oh the guys are in the
Yep.
back and they're like oh these two need to fight next week. Like if this is what they're gonna do, they need to fight. Boom, and it was
Yep.
cool. And instead of it being like oh like I don't know, I guess it was cool that
Well,
it
no,
made
I
sense.
also love it that you also have the aspect that Omega and Pac had a match, and now Pac and Moxley are having a match, and they're
Yes.
really telling this story so well. Where they're it's a blessing in disguise. This Moxley injury.
This
because
is
it's
the
making the
one to
feud so
tell
much
like
better.
this is the one to break down. If we ever wanted to do the essay thing you were talking about, man, this is the one to break
Oh,
down
yeah.
because as a fan, you almost don't catch it. Like I didn't
No,
catch
yeah.
the Pac thing the same way you almost didn't catch the idea of the Joey Janela match. Like you don't catch it at first, but then when you do, you're like, oh man, like that's so
It's
cool, and it
just
is so
works.
cool, and it makes so much sense, and I would almost like to see Pac win. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
just tell the story the same way and help Pac keep racking up wins too. It's like this is pretty sweet. So I really like that, and I honestly, again, I didn't think about it because I'm sitting here watching. I'm like, oh, I want to see Pac face Moxley
Yeah,
next
it's just
week.
a great match.
And then
It's just on top
next
of
thing
that.
you know, they announce. I'm like, oh, even cooler. And like the fact that it's the storyline didn't even dawn on me. But again,
Mhm.
like, and what I appreciate with this tournament, this tag team tournament, they've done such a good job. Is every week you're like have something to look forward to, like two more awesome tag team matches. Like every tag team match, despite like the finish on the SCU one, every tag team match in AEW has felt pretty important or like an exciting
Mhm.
match or like they've delivered on it. So
Absolutely. They have, and they really have delivered on basically everything. There is sometimes where it doesn't feel like wasn't the best it could have been, but you always got what you were thinking you were going to get, I think, in the bare minimum.
yeah. So I think that's great and a good way to lead into next week. Like I said, we've essentially got the whole card laid out for us right there, and it should be good fun. And I basically anticipate the Young Bucks to be more in like a squash match as well, just to get them that extra win going into their match at Full Gear. But it's cool to see them just build up to a pay-per-view for the first time, because we haven't gotten a weekly build with matches and all of this for AEW yet to a pay-per-view. So it's cool.
Oh yeah.
And in the main event, we get the match built up to this week. Jericho defending against Darby Allin. Pretty good match. They gave him about 15 minutes. I really wasn't like blown away by it.
No, me neither.
Darby's obviously had much better showings in AEW in general. Darby did his whole. It depends on where he's at and what he's doing, but he either gets handcuffed or taped behind his back, something like that. Maybe tied behind his back, something along those lines. He's done it in Evolve. He did it in NEW like 3 months ago against Moxley. That's the reason I'm kind of like, maybe not this time. But I also get the idea of them like at first I was against it because I've seen it so much, but I can at least understand that they're trying to tell a story. And then as he's doing it, I'm like, oh, okay, we want to like really put over, like, if we're gonna show the national audience him, let's put him at the biggest, lowest odds, almost come and win. But like, I think the tough part about Darby is we're not as familiar with his finish, that him going up to hit his finish and that feeling of he's about to win didn't really sink in for anybody. Like, I wouldn't have been convinced he would have got the 1, 2, 3 even if he did hit the finish. So for him to have gotten punched right off before he even gets a chance to hit it was something that really threw me off. And
came out of nowhere.
Yeah, he looked all right against Jericho. It was an all right match, but
it was fine. It just wasn't the title match I was expecting it to be, where Darby's fighting with everything he's got. He's trying to go the distance, and it was that, but it just, something felt disappointing, and I don't know.
It's just because it's so early. I feel like it was hard to ever get behind the idea he could possibly win. Again, I really felt like this would have benefited 100 times more in being a non-title match. If anything, to give the fans the idea that Darby's riding a couple of wins, he could get another win over the champion. And then if he wins, he gets a title match, and then have Jericho be like essentially have Hager stop Darby from winning just because you don't want him to get the title match because he almost won once. Like, then
it makes you hate him so much more.
And it tells such a better story. And I get that it's because they wanted to advertise a title match for Philly, and I don't even know if they maybe had this exactly in the plans at that point.
Yeah, probably.
But like, I guess I'm glad that they fulfilled their promise, but that's the sucky part, is that this match just didn't need to be a title match. Maybe they could have had someone else be in this match against Jericho to lose, because Darby did good. It was a fine showing, but there was just parts about it that were And another thing that is difficult for me watching is some matches will have picture-in-picture, and some matches won't. This was the main event for the championship, and I'm almost positive there was at least the last commercial didn't have it in picture-in-picture. So to me, that just like, it's a weird way to gauge it, because this is supposed to be the championship match. Like, I should be able to see every moment of this just in case. And I'm sure it's the network's decision, so it's kind of not up to them. And I'm sure getting closer to the hour, the network doesn't want to do picture-in-picture, but that's the shitty part about that, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely does throw you off that you're not getting it on the most important match. But you're right, it's probably a network decision, and that's probably the hook of it. But it's weird because I feel, isn't there a form of you watching this where if you're watching on TNT.com, you don't have commercials or something?
I know that if it's the maybe not TNT.com, but it's the Fight TV streaming,
that's the one.
That service, you get the whole thing with basically no commercials, which is cool, and that's good for them. And in that sense, it's really not a problem. But like, my biggest gripe with it is it just sort of makes your matches look different. You know what I mean? It's the same as having the women's championship match on so early. I wish that had been the second to last, because again, it just makes the placement and the feeling of the title feel more important. And so that's just my thing.
No, you're right, and I think you're right about that.
Yeah, but overall, a good showing from Jericho and Darby. Jericho, again, like I said, picking up the victory, something I don't think anyone didn't expect. But the good thing I think was that they at least didn't finish again with another wacky brawl.
No, that would have been bad 3 weeks in a row if it was a clear out.
Yeah, it just gets to be too much, and this is fine. They didn't have to do that, and it was overall just really good. You know what I mean? Like they didn't they had the inner circle come out to celebrate with Jericho, celebrate a victory for him, which is good.
A little bit of the bubbly.
Yeah, they continue to promote a little bit of the bubbly, and what's funny is how like Jericho is some sort of genius, man. Because if you notice the the one of the advertisements on the commercial today for Dynamite is Longhorn Steakhouse. I don't think that's much of a coincidence after he loses his championship while he's at Longhorn Steakhouse, right? Or am I remembering the wrong steakhouse, AJ?
I don't remember, so I'm gonna say you're right.
Dude, I'm almost positive it was Longhorn. So they get they get Longhorn advertisements. And last week somebody's posting about how there's bubbly advertisements. Like this is insane that these advertisements are like legit coming through him like on accident or memeing or like losing the title. Like wow, like it's crazy.
I can't wait for the Chris Jericho bubbly commercial. That's gonna be
so it's like fluking into the attention because like you have to like it just makes sense with
it really does.
All the attention the national media gave to just Jericho losing a belt at Longhorn. Like I'm sure Longhorn was like, "Oh, wrestling fans must love us now" or something. So it's cool. It's cool to just see how Jericho's able to translate to the mainstream audience and do like so much more and make sense why he was the guy like that was the first champion. And going into Full Gear, it's cool to see them build him up. And who knows what's going to be next for Darby? I could even see him being the one to end up having to face Jake Hager. Not like that would be an interesting dynamic, especially the David Goliath thing there entirely.
That could be a great match. Yeah, absolutely, it could be a great match, and you could really have. I would love to see Jake Hager get in the ring with anybody and just suplex him around because you know he can just suplex
just
people
beat him down. Yeah, and that's one that you like Darby taking a loss to Hager. That's not a bad thing. Like it's not in a sense of Hager is like way more legitimate of a proven wrestler, but just the fact like he's bigger and he can easily maul and destroy Darby, and Darby can take that beat down. So
it also makes sense that he would look, he would get more wins than on because you want a heater to look really strong and like he can't be beat by a normal guy.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention that hurt the main event especially was this is a street fight, and we have Darby Allin getting rope breaks. And I understand the story they were trying to tell. They wanted it to be Jericho is tired of him getting rope breaks, so he's going to tape his arms behind his back because this guy will never tap out. He's too much into pain, like he will never quit, and that's how Jericho's trying to win is with this submission. So boom, that's the story you're trying to tell. But it's a freaking street fight. And that like it's so weird because he's able to use the tape because it's a street fight, but he's only using the tape because he's getting a rope break in a street fight, and it's so bad that fans are chanting
it's a street fight.
The first WWE moment of AEW, like
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world, but it's something that you would hear.
I'm thinking like maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's a different definition of need, but it's so stupid.
Yeah.
Why?
Yep.
Why in a street fight do you have rope breaks? That's the most ridiculous
thing.
The thing
is they'll
it's a street fight, Andrew. You should be able to win outside of the ring.
I agree, dude. And what I'll say is the most annoying part about it is they're gonna turn around on being the elite and try and make a joke out of it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go.
They're gonna have Rich Knox out in the middle of a street, and they're gonna have somebody getting beat up, and he's gonna grab a piece of rope off the ground. And Rich Knox is going to be like, break it up. And one of them's going to look at him and be like, it's a street fight. He's going to just shrug his shoulders, and that's the whole being the elite segment.
I can see it.
You're welcome, fans.
I can see it, and
spoilers.
I don't like it.
Like, and that's the only issue I have with them is, like, hopefully they just ignore it. Like, just don't do it again next time. Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't have to respond to everything like this. Is my thing. So, and that was the one thing I think that sort of hurt a little bit in this situation, and it's something that you see in wrestling like a lot in these specialty type matches is that a referee or whoever or even the wrestlers aren't trained enough to understand, and that's what's almost hurting AEW right now is they're twisting the rules just a little bit in order to tell their story or wanting to tell a story in a match. And they just don't have to. They could just have fine matches or like really good matches, you know? And this is at least the second time that this has happened. And this is probably the worst case of it, just because, like I said, you can see the story they were trying to tell and why they did it. And again, it makes Darby look like that teen heartthrob fighting back, because that was the one thing I saw is he's like laid up against the corner and fight. I'm like, teen girls will love this. He's trying so hard. But at the same time, it's like, oh man.
Wow, he's really doing his best.
That's
what teen girls love.
But overall, like it was a pretty good main event. I wasn't too disappointed in it. In terms of my Wednesday night's main event, I'm gonna have to say it was Paige and Omega beating Mox and Pac, like easily the match of the night. But I feel like it's not even in terms of like we've done 3 Wednesday nights main events so far. First one was Riho versus Nyla. Second one was Private Party versus the Young Bucks. This one, Paige and Omega versus Pac and Moxley, is easily the third best. Like it's probably at the bottom tier for me in terms of like the best match that AEW has put out on their cards. It was just like for a week where we had a super strong card, and going into it, it looked on paper like a phenomenal show. I'm not saying it was a bad show. I just think that it almost underdelivered in terms of what we were anticipating.
Yeah, there were so many expectations because when you present a stacked card, you know, you're
2 title matches, 2 tournament matches.
That's a lot, and so I was expecting a lot. And if it was a different card and different matches spread out, like these matches spread out on different cards, I would probably perceive them and look at them a lot differently.
That's the thing, too.
Here together, I just don't like it. I don't dislike. You know what I mean.
It's like really, an average show. You know what I mean?
It's
very
average. It's middle.
And it's like it's almost the thing that helps them the most is what hurt them the most this night is like they either hit on all cylinders or they don't. In the sense of like on their good shows, they have like 4 out of 5 matches are like spectacular. So you're like, oh, this was a phenomenal show. On this show, every match had a little kink in it almost, except for that tag team match. Every match had a little kink where you're like, oh man. And because of that little kink in every match and it happening 4 out of 5 times, the show itself just sort of took a little bit of a dip for me. I don't know if that I don't think it'll hurt like ratings or anything. I just think in terms of like
still a good show.
Exactly. It was not a bad show. I think it's just we're comparing it to the last 3 shows or the last 2 shows or any of the AEW shows, and it's almost like how I felt when I watched Fyter Fest, or maybe not even Fyter Fest, but Fight for the Fallen. When I watched that pay-per-view, and I was like, this isn't bad, but this is what like an average AEW show feels like, and that's essentially how I felt here.
To be desired a little bit.
Yeah. So overall, it was a good Wednesday, though. Like another fine Wednesday of just entertaining.
I had a great time. I had a fun time.
And honestly, I would almost go out on a ledge to change up our meaning of Wednesday night's main event, because we have to cover Dark, and say that Janela versus Moxley is my Wednesday night's main event. If there's an AEW match that you have to check out this week, like if you're a fan who hasn't seen anything, that's the one. Yep. Like, and I'd be shocked if you're tuning into an AEW podcast and haven't seen that match yet. But if you haven't, take the time, man. Take the time to go and check it out, because what a star-making performance for Janela. I wish that they would have done some type of highlight reel for that match on the show. They
really should have.
What they really needed, because that's how you get eyes to Dark. You know, we need something on this show to promote Dark, and I haven't really seen that over the last 3 weeks. That's the one thing I've been itching for, is like, we're doing this show, and week 1 it made sense because they didn't have the date picked out yet, but in weeks 2 and 3, we should be saying, oh. And I think maybe last week they had talked about Janela versus Mox a tiny bit, but maybe even not, you know?
And it's getting insane numbers without them talking about it, which you got to think whenever they promote it, how much are these numbers going to jump up?
Yes, and if they had put even a minute highlight clip of that match, I guarantee you the numbers spike tonight. So
absolutely.
That's just the decision making. Like I know for a fact they could have found a minute in there to do that. I don't blame them for not. But that's my, like, as a Janela fan, that's what I want. I need to see Janela on TNT, brother.
Yeah, I do too. Because
we're really 3 weeks in now, and name like a more high-profile person who hasn't really been utilized on TV. I will say though that MJF hasn't either as much. He's gotten his moments, like in week 1 he got his moment with the match and he won. Last week he definitely got his moment in getting to come out and have everyone pop for him not turning. But this week there was obviously no MJF, and that's like you notice that with some of these guys, especially some of our guys that are our guys, you know.
And on that note, no, I cannot name somebody more high profile than Joey Janela. Even MJF, I wouldn't consider him more high profile at this point.
Yeah, as far as who hasn't really been utilized much, he got that main event match. But again, I just want to see like hype for him or hype videos for anybody. What happened to Wardlow? You know?
Yeah.
Or even like Sadie Gibbs. She wasn't very impressive in her one match in the Casino Battle Royale, but she got hype videos. Like, why did we do so many hype videos before and there really hasn't been anything?
Bring them back. More hype videos.
I do understand they have to establish like certain people first and early on. Yes. And like shit, this week was the first week we got Jungle Boy on national TV, and he's someone who everybody knows is going to be a star. So it's gonna take time and it'll come over time. But especially once they have champions and stuff like that figured out, I think, because with the tournament, it definitely takes up a lot of the card. But
no, you're right. And yeah, it's going to get better as it goes on. But for now, I just want to see Joey Janela.
Yes, same, absolutely same. But overall, a good show. Probably easily the third best show of the 3 shows of Dynamite that we've gotten so far. I don't want to say the worst,
agreed,
but easily the third best of the 3 shows, which is fine, but a little bit of a disappointment with 2 title matches, you know?
As it reminded them of WWE SmackDown when it was like 2006. And I was like, you know, and they said the only thing that doesn't strongly discern them from that being a really good WWE show is the roster. And I agree with them very much that this felt like a time where I really enjoyed watching wrestling.
Yes, and then that's the thing is I still enjoyed the show. It just didn't have that like like it wasn't, because every other show has just been like great match, and instead like it was almost like the matches were having hiccups at the worst possible times, so it was sticking with you, and then going into the next match there would be a hiccup, and it just couldn't ever really get going on like a stellar show. Like I said, in terms of how they laid out the match card, they did the best job they could, because the last 2 matches were the 2 better matches on the show, but it just left a lot to be desired. And I think it's not all their fault. Like Luchasaurus was out, there was just issues there. There was SCU missed that finish, and it was just like from there.
Yeah, and next week we're gonna have another show, and it's probably gonna be
and it will come back and be like, oh. And I think that was also the thing. Like, despite the fact that we don't want these crazy hype like brawls at the end of every show, it took away that feeling of, oh my god, I'm so excited at the end.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. But I definitely noticed it. I was like, okay, this is how it feels when a show just ends, and they need to just end shows sometimes. Not every show can have that cliffhanger feeling that we've got in the last 2 weeks. So they did fine. And I'm just excited for next week still. Like, they have a good match card laid out for next week. They have a good build going into Full Gear. They're in like full speed ahead mode where everything is starting to come together. So as a fan, I'm super excited, despite maybe a lackluster feeling coming out of the third show. So
no, yeah, I'm 100% still excited and still on board with this.
Yeah, so go ahead and plug your social media though, AJ, as we wrap everything up.
You can follow me on Instagram at AJ the Fitzy, and you can follow me on Twitter at Big Match AJ.
And as always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at All Elite Everything. You can chat with us on Discord at discord.io/All Elite Podcast. You can check out our website, alleliteeverything.com. And Facebook. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/AllElitePod. Shout out to everybody who just checks us out, either from my family or our friends or anybody who checks us out that we don't know across the United States. Just people or outside of the United States. Shout out to our UK listeners. Shout out to our YouTube listeners. Shout out to our Spotify listeners. Shout out to people who check us out on Buzzsprout. Shout out to the people on Twitter who check us out. Shout out to just everyone for continuing to check us out and support us and give us the drive to like do this thing, and it's so fun, and to like have that motivation and to continue doing everything. So shout out to everyone for checking everything out. You can follow me on Twitter at AllEliteAndy, but that really wraps everything up for us this week. Until next week, see ya.
What?